This is the story of Elvis Presley, the 68 comeback special, and a red Hagstrom guitar. It's June 1968. Elvis Presley's return to live performance came after a 7-year period during which he focused on his film appearances. Elvis borrowed a 1968 red Hagstrom Viking II guitar for several sections of the show, including his stand-up performance in front of a live audience. The guitar throughout the years has been mistaken as his, and is often referred to as the Elvis guitar. In fact, it belonged to Wrecking Crew session player Al Casey. Here's the story. It's June 1968. Filming took place at NBC Studios in Burbank, California. The special included a sit-down session that showcased Presley in an informal setting, surrounded by fans and a small band. The tracks for the television special were recorded at Western Recorders Studio in Hollywood. All of the material, except for the live sections of the show, were pre-recorded by Presley. It was to be blended with live vocals during the production numbers, which were taped on June the 27th. Director Steve Binder and producer Bones Howe hired Wrecking Crew musicians, including drummer Hal Blaine and guitarists Mike Deasy, Tommy Tedesco and Al Casey. The image at the bottom left of the screen of Tommy Tedesco with Elvis and Mike Deasy was actually taken by Al Casey. Al Casey was born in California on the 26th of October 1936, and when he was 2 he moved with his family to Phoenix, Arizona. It was his father who got him started early on the ukulele to match his small fingers until he was 8 years old, and he started guitar lessons. Al became successful as an artist, songwriter and guitarist. He eventually moved to Los Angeles, working through the 60s, 70s and 80s as a top studio player. During his 18 years with the Wrecking Crew, he worked with all the top artists of the day, including the Beach Boys, Phil Spector, Elvis Presley, Glenn Campbell, The Association, Johnny Cash, Eddie Arnold, Simon and Garfunkel, The Fifth Dimension, Harry Nilsson, Frank and Nancy Sinatra, to name but a few. The 1958 Duane Eddy hit Ramrod was written by Al Casey. It was a song the Beatles also used in their early repertoire. In the late 1960s, at his peak, Casey worked 2 to 3 sessions a day and ran a music store in Hollywood called Al Casey's Music Room from 1966 until 1970. Al's music store was popular with all the Wrecking Crew musicians. He worked there with his wife Maxine, a young Richard Bennett and Mort Marker, and they stocked a range of guitars including Hagstrom and Bartell. Around 1956, Casey crossed paths with Lee Hazelwood, an Arizona radio DJ who was looking for a singer to record his song, The Fool. Casey suggested his friend Sanford Clark for the lead vocals, with Casey playing guitar for the recording. The Fool became a national hit and reached number 9 on the Billboard Top 10 pop charts. Al played guitar on a big hit for his Wrecking Crew buddy Glenn Campbell, the hit song Galveston. Casey was also in the band for 3 years on the Dean Martin Show. He was inducted into the Arizona Music Hall of Fame in 2005 and also into the Rockabilly Hall of Fame. When Al got the call to play for Elvis in sessions for the 68 comeback special, Al said, "The producer came to the studio players asking if anyone had something flashy that Elvis could use. He thought it would make a better shot if he was playing something interesting. I had the Hagstrom in my instrument trunk and offered it to Elvis." Al went on to say that once Elvis had a guitar to play, he needed an amplifier to play it through, and the Benson is what I had with me. In the images, you can see the amplifier clearly on the left-hand side of the stage that Elvis had his guitar plugged into. On the right-hand image, you can just about make out Mike Deasy sitting there in the background with a white tunic on. Mike Deasy was born in 1941. He was another terrific session player. He had credits in Hollywood for movies such as The Graduate, Dirty Harry, Forrest Gump, The Rock, Boogie Nights and more. Mike Deasy had an interesting encounter one time with George Harrison. In 1967, in August, George Harrison and Neil Aspinall went to Western Recorders Studios to gatecrash a session with Lou Adler and John Phillips. Deasy was playing a special prototype guitar that he got from Al Casey. It was a Bartel fretless. Harrison was intrigued, so Neil Aspinall ordered one in secret. It was Al's wife Maxine who delivered the guitar to George Harrison on Blue Jay Way. But that's another story. In addition to the 68 special with Elvis, Al also played on the soundtrack sessions at Western Recorders in 1968 that originally yielded Elvis's remastered hit A Little Less Conversation. The question is, what happened to the Hagstrom Guitar after the 68 comeback special? A friend of Al Casey's, Patrick Moore, said, "I used to hang out with Al at Ziggy's Music in Phoenix. I played it a few times." Al did not give the guitar to Elvis, he just loaned it to him for the show. Al still had it in the early 90s and put it up for sale at Ziggy's Music Store. It was $400. Incredibly, he couldn't sell it at that price. So I suggested he try the Hard Rock Cafe, who bought it from him for much more. That's the way it went. Many years later, the guitar resurfaced and was put on display during the media preview of the Artifacts of Hollywood and Music auction at the Glenn Campbell Museum and Rhinestone Stage on March the 22nd, 2021 in Nashville. Finally, coming under the hammer, the guitar was auctioned by GWS Auctions on the 27th of March 2021. The bidding started at $250,000 and finally reached $500,000. However, that wasn't the end of it. The guitar returned again to auction the following year on the 27th of August 2022, and this time the hammer fell on the Hagstrom at $750,000. But what, may you ask, happened to the amplifier? After Al had moved back to Phoenix, he sold the Benson 200 amplifier to one of his students, Doug Myers. Then Doug later gifted it to highly respected Nashville guitarist and Al Casey's protege, Richard Bennett. Richard Bennett explained, "Doug Myers contacted me about the Benson amplifier and wanted me to have it as a gift. The Vox speaker is not original but something that Al put in years ago. I kept it because the amps sound so good just like it is." The Benson 200s were never commercially produced. Ron made them custom for the session guys who wanted one. They are scarcely larger than a briefcase and put out so much sound. Its size was a plus. Prior to musicians having cartage, guitar players had to pack as much stuff as they could into the trunks of their cars, so a small amp was the order of the day. One of the reasons they all drove Cadillacs was the size of the trunk. So there we have it. That is the story of Al Casey's red Hagstrom guitar, his Benson amplifier, once paid by Elvis Presley on the 68 comeback special.